Hello, Wasteland. Yes, at the dawn of time, there were cars. Well, my cars to be exact. Now you might think, well, James, you've gone on record before as saying this is your favourite car in the whole world, Screaming Skull. Does that mean it's the first car you ever made? No, technically no. Even though Screaming Skull here might be in the intro to pretty much all my videos, and in fact it's the inspiration behind my logo, it is not the first ever car I ever made back in the windy, cold, icy cold days of 2015, 2016. No, back then, back when I was just getting into this sort of thing, I decided not to do the sensible thing and make a nice, easy, effective build and paint job. I decided to jump in at the deep end. So, for those who have known me for years, this is the first ever car, one of the first ever cars I ever made. And I think maybe 3 people alive have seen these. So yes, here it is. Yeah, it's that interesting, isn't it? Yeah, this is a Matchbox, what is it? Sahara Survivor. And when I very first tried to make some Mad Max cars, yeah, I just jumped in too deep and just made my life much harder than it needed to be. I wanted to do interiors and passengers, and you know, this is a great car, and I will tune it up one day, but it was too much for me at the time, and I realised that what I needed was something far simpler and far more effective, and so Screaming Skull was born. And this will always be my favourite car. You know, if someone ever asked me, oh, if you were in the Wasteland, what would your ride be? It would be Screaming Skull without a doubt. It is the one car that I made, and from that I can go, yeah, this works. This is a thing that I can do and enjoy and make videos on. So yeah, without Screaming Skull, none of what you see now would have happened. So, let's talk about my collection, as it were. Now, there are some caveats to this. This isn't the full collection. There's lots of gaps, there's lots of bits missing, mainly because things I've made over the years, like commissions, they are sent to the people that they're made for, so I don't have those now. Likewise, cars that I've given away as gifts, and yes, I know I've got a giveaway to do. Although, yes, I've made them, well, they're no longer part of the collection, are they? They've been given away. So, yeah, those will just be photos I'll drop in, but this is everything else. This is all the stuff that's been quote-unquote too good to give away, although in some cases it's unfinished tat. But anyway, let's start with the originals. Let us go back to a time before time, when Gaslands was yet a twinkle on the horizon and the nuclear apocalypse of racing hadn't yet hit us. So what cars was I playing with back when Gaslands was in beta test? Well, I had a mixed bunch, so we say. So yes, Screaming Skull was one of the originals. But then there was stuff like this Volkswagen Chariot type build, this rather lovely, almost limousine-like build that I'm sure lots of people will recognise the car, because it is quite a popular one for conversions. There was stuff like this little, I suppose it was like an iron cross or something. That was, I think, the idea on the hood there, on the ceiling of the car. But yeah, there was this guy. What was this made out of? This was made out of a Isogriffo. I've never heard of that. But yeah, it's one of them. So one of these, I had one of these, which I think were called Big Bangers or something like that back in the day. And they probably still are, but as you can tell, things like the chain on him has come a bit loose. And was it called a Big Banger? Number 20 Matchbox Superfast. Oh, Big Banger, yeah. It was called a Big Banger. But yeah, so that was one I liked playtesting with. Tell you what, we'll have to move these around as the video goes on. And yeah, so the sort of initial team that I made was quite quite cool, quite conservative. It looks a lot like the average Joe Gaslands team that's out there, and that's a good thing. It's nice to know that we all come from the same place, and the stuff that I do, you can do too. It's not all that hard. For example, one of my first, what I really enjoyed making builds, was what I called the Reaper. So, with all my cars at this time, I tended to try and put some decoration on the very top of the car. So in this case, a skull and crossbones, a screaming skull, an iron star. There was another one which I called Spooky Skull, and I gave that away to Rob at the first ever Gaslands tournament back in 2018. I think it was 2018, last year. So he's got that one. Same as Brum the Murder Tractor, famously given to Mike. Famously appearing at various Gasland booths across the UK since then, in a little display stand, which I'm very, very, very grateful for. But yes, one of them was the Reaper, which I'd always enjoyed sort of cobbling together cars, and this was no exception. I used a very old truck chassis basis for the cockpit area, and I love the idea of white wall tyres on a Wasteland vehicle. So stuff like this horse skull on it, and yeah, I was very pleased with this one when I first made this all those years ago. But the thing is, back then there weren't, you could just make whatever, and you can still do that now. That's not changed. You can build whatever the hell you want. It's just now people sort of look in the rulebook and go, oh, I'm not sure quite what it would count as, and isn't that a bit long to be a car, and isn't that a bit long to be a truck? And it's like, well, it doesn't matter. It can be anything, whatever you want it to be. It's your cars and your game. Have fun. But yeah, there's the Reaper skull there on the hood, because I was keen on putting those everywhere. And yeah, so back then, just like now, there was lots of personalising and customising and making these things your own, and there still is in the community, and there always will be, because it's that kind of game. But that wasn't all I made. I also made an enormous monster truck, and this has appeared on the Bleeped Up Production YouTube channel. One of the first games me and Lee ever had was a game of lion and mice, as it were, cat and mouse, where my monster truck was taking on his wonderful little team. Yeah, body of a Chevy and a Impala, I believe. So back then it was all very simple. It was all a bit rough, and I was sort of just sticking bits on to fill gaps and not worrying about things, and there's a lot of that now. But the one thing that does happen over time, and sadly you will see this in a lot of my models, things get damaged, like this little paper banner. I need to replace that, and one of his exhaust stacks has come off, and the burden of time, it gets us all, doesn't it? So yeah, back in the good old days, that was the original team. I mean, there's minus one or two cars, minus Brum the Murder Tractor and all this, but this was originally what I started off with. This was the collection. So what we got here, 7 cars plus Brum, that's 8, plus Spooky Skull, that's 9. So just under 10 cars, and that's all I had, and I was happy with it. But time moves on. It doesn't stay like this forever. So as the years went on, I made more cars. As the years went on. No, you got to think, as a timeline, all those cars I just showed you so far, those 7 cars, that would have been back in 2015, 2016. And then as we slowly creep forwards a couple more months, this is when we start getting into some, I guess, just more technical builds. So, for example, we have here the Lucky 13, which is based off of a universally beloved Hot Wheels gasser. And this was when I started trying to keep decals on the builds rather than remove them, as well as try and make some of my own. And the very first decals I made are pretty rough, but it was a learning experience. But it's such a beautiful model, and it's such an iconic car. It's no surprise that so many people have used it, you know, because it's just one of those things. A Ford Gasser, look at that. It's one of those iconic hot rod type cars, and it looks so similar to that wonderful bone shaker build that Hot Wheels have. Like, these two were my main goes-tos. This one even I took to the first ever Gasland competition. I took that with me, as well as my Sweet Tooth ice cream truck, and sadly they both died, but you know, they were there. And of course Bone Shaker, the car that started it all. So we had, for example, this one, my attempt at a Chevrolet Impala, which I believe is... No! This is a Cadillac Sedan DeVille. Colour me corrected. For the longest time I thought this was a Chevy Impala, but it was not. It was a Caddy. But yeah, so trying things like longer exhausts or little details at the back, and making barbed wire and putting barbed wire on the hood of a car. Like, that was something I hadn't tried before. Trying to hand twist barbed wire out of just like brass wire. So yeah. What else? What else? We had all sorts. Like, there's this truck which sort of, I think, looked a bit orkier, a bit 40k orcs, more than I wanted it to, because there was always that temptation to put a big grin on a truck, but I couldn't sadly do that with all of them, because I think then it really would be like something out of 40k. Although, mind you, if I had that there and had another one on top, it would look like a big closing that. Yeah, that would work. But again, you can see the very early days of trying to use decals, and just very, very simple paint job. Like, it doesn't have to be complicated. You know, just get it on there, get it done, get the model done. Like, the wheel change was again very simple back then, and you know, all those many thousands of years ago. Ford. So yeah, lots of fun building these different cars. How can I forget this madness? This is my truck tank, or trank. So you've got the lower, well, I say bottom half. It's not a bottom half, it's a bottom half of a Ford truck. It even says Ford on the back. But the sides are from a Sherman toy kit, and you can even see in areas where the paint started to come off. But I wanted something that was big, and you know, it was a combination of a couple of cars, so it'd really be menacing driving along. Got a big standard there. But the most eye-catching part, of course, is this, which was what I like to call a, well, it's like a Wasteland lawnmower, isn't it? It's barbed wire wrapped around posts, connected up to a little toy motorbike. So something that was really heavily inspired by like Scrap Heap Challenge here in the UK. But I just love the idea that to another car, yeah, that wouldn't do much damage, but to a motorcyclist, yeah, that'd be pretty bad. You wouldn't want to get hit by that. So I think back in the day I described this as my first Marmite build, which is either you'll love it or you'll hate it. So it's one of those things. But I've always enjoyed trying new things, and you know, maybe if this was a bit more angled, so it looked like a ramp that people sort of drove into and then really got stuck inside and killed. You know, things to change in the future. What else? I remember I made this rather lovely police interceptor type build, but never really finished it. I had some spiky ram bit here, spiky rams, and this was mostly made from parts from one of the Devil's Run accessories kits, but I wasn't really happy with it, to be fair. So the wheels and the ram, which has since broken off, yeah, they kind of, the one thing with Devil's Run is they just take parts that already exist and just scale them down. So these giant wheels were from a big truck, and they just scaled the wheels down and sold them as an accessory. And that's fine, because it gives you, you know, a change of scale and design. But yeah, as an accessories kit, it wasn't the greatest. It's like this wonderful little rocket RPG bit here. That was from one of these like Warlord Games type smaller companies that did like sort of modern Insurgents and Spec Ops, some zombie survival game. It was probably called like DayZ Project or some rubbish. It's one of those dime a dozen throwaway games that, you know, everything's a sci-fi skirmish. But anyway, enough about that. So yeah, again, trying to freehand things and went for a bit too much detail with this. Police skull with sunglasses. Oh, God. Yeah, not the best. But I keep it because it's a reminder of where I've come from and, you know, how far I've yet to go. Alright, this will be a fun one for you. My Citrons. So this is a Citron 2CV. Oh yes. There have been a few of these that have been done up for the Wasteland. Some of them are super, super nice. But this was my first ever take on a Citron 2CV. Kept the wheels, you know, kept most of it. Made by Corgi. And yeah, I had a blast. I mean, I cut open the top to try and like do some custom interior and put these little guys in there, but oh boy, yeah, still a learning process back then. But I still like it. It needs, like most of these older builds, it needs touching up, it needs fixing, it needs finishing, but yeah. But that said, I didn't just have the 2CV, I had the Citron 15CV as well. So look at the size of this boy. And I really went over the top with the headlights in this one. I love the idea of having like a skull as well as all these extra details. And I tried to paint like a bit of a horizon thing on the front windscreen, but yeah, lots of things that are work in progress and still learning, trying to cut open cars to put crew on the outside, and yeah, I've come a long way since then, but at the same time I've still got a long way to go. So that was kind of like the I guess you would call this like the pre-YouTube days, before I'd really taken on any commission work, and likewise before I really got this craft, as it were, down. I mean, I'm still learning now. I wouldn't say I'm fully developed or anything like that, because I know I'm not, but I certainly enjoy looking at these old builds. And the nice thing is you can still use them, like they're still perfectly good on the tabletop, which is nice. So let's have a look at the next round, which is all the cars that I made for YouTube, which technically means you've seen them all. So I'll just put them all here, and then we'll go on to the next subject. Yeah, so I don't think these need any introduction really. These are all cars that so far you've seen on this channel, at least seen, that have been completed and painted and quote-unquote finished, because there's always stuff to do. But like my 255 Corvette challenge, where could I make a Wasteland car for the price of a Games Workshop paint? Oh, I remember that. Good times. And like this, from the first ever video I ever did. Ah, yes, he's still there. But don't forget the car from Ben Kane. That was always really cool, receiving that. Look at that skull. Look at that skull. Yes, so... And, of course, the first ever mystery misery build and misery painting challenge. So there's always been lots of different cars and things that have cropped up on this channel, and more are coming, so all I can say is stay tuned for that. And this isn't the last you've seen of these either. What have we done so far? We've done about 11 cars. That's pretty good. That's pretty good for a channel this size. So yeah. Yes, to all the cars that I've done in collaborations, so in videos with Bleeped Up Productions, our good friends. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? I've had a lot of fun playing with Lee, playing games of Gaslands, and as well as doing the Pits Up series where we made our, you know, really cool custom cars, and I made my extra thick Hot Wheels Street Wiener car, you know, with the ketchup and mustard mortar at the front and back. Yeah, you know, it's one of those things. This channel, this show, it's not just about making cars privately for myself anymore. It's been about making stuff that's fun for you guys as well. Like when I showed you guys how to make, you know, my attempt of buzzards from Mad Max Fury Road. You know, I love the idea of this hedgerow of spikes, as a lot of people do, but, you know, up until I made a video about it, I don't really think I'd ever really tried to show people how to do it before. So yeah, it's been quite nice doing all these little bits for you guys. But what else? Keep moving on. There's too many cars. There's too many cars to just stand still like this. So that's been it so far for all my cars that are just your stereotypical Wasteland stuff. But what about my more specific builds? So, for example, how can I do a video like this and not talk about everyone's favourite Sweet Tooth ice cream truck, which, yes, is coming up in the brand new Gaslands 2.0 rulebook. Under ice cream truck, you will see this wonderful happy chappy. You know, it's one of those builds that when I first got into this, I knew I had to do. Like, it's so iconic, and anyone who's ever played Twisted Metal Black will know immediately what it is. And to everyone who hasn't, well, you can figure it out. It's not the most difficult thing to look at and understand. It's quite clearly quite an evil ice cream truck with a flamethrower. But what else? What other film things have I done, or TV show and games? Well, I did do a take on the Ghostbusters hearse. And, you know, I've had this for quite a while, but never really felt a need to do a video on it. I technically used a, what is this? This is a Cadillac Ambulance, 63 Ambulance, because that's the model I had. I didn't have the hearse, so I just made one out of, you know, the closest, the second closest thing. And yeah, I had a blast. Ecto 1, the incredibly crude freehand on the back there, and a giant ghost obliterating laser or whatever it's called. But yeah, sadly, I think only the front wheels move. The back ones, oh no, the back ones do move as well. Yeah, they really grind. So yeah, that was another one that I did. Let's just stick you there. And in terms of TV shows, I've done the Captain Scarlet Interceptor, which isn't well known for a lot of people outside the UK, or for a lot of people in the UK anyway. But Captain Scarlet was a wonderful TV show we had over here, and I believe the Scarlet Interceptor was his car, because I know he had a tank that was called Spy 1, which I always really loved, and we'll probably Wasteland one of those at one day. But yeah, the Scarlet Interceptor. And the little back opens up, and I put a load of stuff in there. Oops, sorry. It's very loose, however. And I put like this little rocket pod and all the cool accessories a young Wasteland adventurer could ever want. But yeah, so that's about it for all the stuff I've done so far that are sort of obvious clickbait pop culture references. And, you know, I might do more of these in the future. I might have like some more things from the Twisted Metal games, or some more movie cars. I've got a Chevrolet Impala from the Supernatural TV show that I need to do up at some point. And anyone who's watched Stranger Things season 2 and 3 will know of the character Billy and his car, and that just needs to be done because of my undying love for Billy. Okay, so just to quickly wrap up the cars then, these are the sort of the little extra things that I've done either for this channel but never finished, or I've just been doing in my free time for fun. So for example, we've got that from a box of scraps car, which was made entirely out of just spares and bits of plastic and just rubbish and junk. You know, we've got that as a wonderful example. We've got this car, which I never I never did a video on, but I always wanted to, and I will one day, which is technically a half and half car. It's the left half and the right half. The left comes from what I believe is called a Ford Fairlane, and the right is from a Lowdown, which I don't even know if that was branded Matchbox or Hot Wheels back in the day, but it's just Lowdown. So I was going to call it the Low Lane. And it is just a pair of bodies riveted together, which I thought was quite nice. And then mismatching wheels, because somehow this thing has to try and roll. But yeah, so I'll have a video about making those kinds of cars at some point. Got another one of these little grabber truck things with a little Grim Reaper scythe to indicate that it belongs to my dead men gang. You know, making little harpoon weapons, which is always good fun. And then I remember I started a period where I was just looking at having more functionality to my car. So in this case, the little hydraulic would actually come down. And that created wonderful little scenarios where you could turn that around and then have other cars and things hooked onto it. There you go. And then that can be pulled off. Yeah, and then there was some more futuristic-y things that I made, like this. It was a very cheap, like completely unbranded. It says Hot Wheels 306, but it's barely even that. It's just HW 306, like just these cheap knockoff cars you can get from like charity shops, and turning it into something that looks a bit more retro and a bit more out of the dark future sort of universe, especially with that dark future gun on top. And then there's this wonderful guy, my wonderful drag racer that I made. I say made, basically got a car, stuck a tiny bit of engine detail to it, and just painted it because it was good to go. I think I changed the wheels, and that was about it. But I just absolutely enjoyed painting this up. Just such a breeze, so fun. And it's more for the sort of auto kill universe with all the different product branding and merchandising like Warrior energy drinks and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, absolutely loved it. So yeah, that sort of wraps it up for all the weird cars and things I've sort of had going on in my free time, as well as things that need finishing for the channel. So let's have a look at the big toys now, which is pretty much just going to wrap up this video. Before the Mad Dog, before I made a doof wagon, before any of that, I made a war rig. And this is the war rig. This is what set the chain of events off that led to me making a YouTube channel. If this was the spark, this was the fire that followed. The Wolverine. Oh baby. The single biggest war rig I have ever made. So big, in fact, that it has smaller car bodies attached to it via chain and barbed wire. It is absolutely titanic. And it is by far the biggest model, or one of the biggest models I've ever made. You know, it has all the functionality you could ever want, like little gun turrets that move and a giant snowplow for killing things. And it is enormous. I mean, I can barely fit it entirely in shot. I mean, just trying to get like the banners and all the extra bits. It's huge. But that's what I wanted. I mean, for so long, whenever I saw people making war rigs, they always based them off of wonderful little Poundland trucks, and that's fine. I will never deny that that is a-okay. However, I wanted something a bit bigger. And that's what I made. I found this wonderful truck cab. If I just separate this... Oh no, it's breaking. The war rig, the Wolverine, is falling apart before our very eyes. It's fine. Let's just snap that off. No one needs to know. Let's move that back. So if we just look at the cab for a second. So this was based off of, I believe it was a 1/48 scale, rather than the usual 1/70 whatever Hot Wheels normally is. And I knew that this was going to be the cab for it, because if you drive around in real life and drive up to, next to the really big, like double-decker size, Land Cruiser lorries, and they're enormous. They're absolutely enormous. I don't buy into the whole they should be the same size as cars, because they're not. They are huge. So this is where it all sort of took off. This is what built it all up. This is the foundation of my empire. Mike Hutchinson, our Lord and Father, the creator of Gaslands, fell in love with this, and he's not even seen it yet. And that's a detriment. I should really get around to fixing that. But this is where it all began. Without this, there is nothing. And after this, there is nothing. Ha ha ha. All that usual rubbish. But if we just pull in the back for a minute. Oh, there we go. Absolute beast of a unit. I made it so that the front door opens up and you could stick things inside there. And one of the key features is it's actually big enough that you can quite comfortably put a little car underneath it. Because I like the idea of, in the middle of a race, you could have cars weave in and out of a war rig, because it's that big. It's on Tonka wheels. It's a big lad. So yeah, that is the Wolverine. It has not one but two pictures in the new Gaslands book that's coming out. It is the front picture of Time Extended 1. It is the poster boy of Time Extended. It is everything. It is the biggest war rig. It is such a beast. And I'm the one that made it. I could talk about this thing for a while, because there's so many different details and areas that I did going along. I mean, parts of it are magnetized, because I wanted to be able to look inside, because more often than not, war rigs are a big solid container, but I wanted to be able to look inside and see what was in there. All these decorations and things, and like a seat on the back with a little skull on it, and all this kind of stuff. Like, this is where they drink. I wanted the war rig to be more than just a big target on the field. I wanted it to almost be a bit of terrain, something scenic. So yeah, it's a big unit. So if that was the Wolverine, then of course the next thing I need to talk about is the Mad Dog, which represents the biggest vehicles that I make right now. Yeah, I mean, it's such an iconic build that I've done that it has its own YouTube video. I mean, it was a competition entry. It got into Gaslands Time Extended 2. Sadly, it didn't get the front cover like Time Extended 1 with the Wolverine, but second place, at least I'm in there. But it's huge. It's enormous. I mean, look at the size of the car. It just vanishes into comparison. And that's how I see certain things, like excavator trucks and stuff like war rigs. Oh, how embarrassing. It just keeps falling apart. This is how I see certain things. I see them as enormous and imposing, and they're just part of this world, this universe that's been created. That isn't just Mad Max, and it isn't just generic apocalypse. It's more than that. And that's really cool. I like the idea that this stuff can exist in the same kind of universe that's going to also have really high-tech sports cars that are Japanese inspired. And it also has biker gangs, and it also has, doof wagons, and just racing war rigs with space rockets that fuel them, and all sorts of weird things that are all intermeshed nicely into the same whole. So here is the master of music, my doof wagon. And there's lots of these out there. People have been making doof wagons since the Fury Road film came out. The concept isn't anything new, and certainly having all these little miniature speakers and speakers that I made out of Plasticard myself isn't a new attempt or anything. But this is mine. This is how I did it, and I love it. I think I did a really good job at the time, considering the sort of restrictions I set myself, and trying to make these little drummers and not having the right people to do just that. You know, it was tough, but it all worked out. As well as I wanted the idea being that you could remove the driver and the mesh of the front of the speaker and pop a mini speaker in. But it does actually work. So yeah, so when it comes to the bigger, more impressive things, I've done quite a few of them as well, to be fair. It's not all just little cars, it's the stuff that really turns heads as well, which I'm quite proud of. So this sort of Wasteland adventure, it's still gearing up, it's not really ended yet. And there's still plenty of more things for me to show you guys and build and see what works and what doesn't. It's just a matter of doing it, really, of pulling my finger out and building all this stuff. And if you guys want to come along for the ride and see it all as well. Okay, because we've officially gone past the time limit, the last few things are just going to be chucked on here, and then we'll have to do a follow-up video. So, for example, I did a giant monster truck for a competition on a website. Didn't win, but I did get a runner-up prize, but I'll actually do a video at some point talking about that. But I was just pointing out here that it exists, and I would like to point out is also significantly taller than my other monster truck and has a wider wheelbase. Check that out. Even though it's based on the same model, initially the same toy, has the same wheels, but these have been spaced out more. So there's that, the War Beast. But just before I go, in terms of unfinished things, I know someone out there is going to comment, oh, what about the war rig that you were doing for this channel? Yes, that exists. Yes, I haven't forgotten it, and yes, I need to finish it and finish the painting and, you know, do it proud because it's Gaslands, and I was going to send it off to the Battlehammer guys, and yeah, we're getting there. As well as, this is a real rusty, nasty looking thing. This, which was going to be like my scavenger type rig, oh, the wheels are falling off, and it is just, yeah, but like the whole crane bit at the back moves around, which is really cool, and yeah, we'll do a video on that at some point when it's actually done and not broken. But if I leave you with anything today, other than the fact that I've made lots of toy cars, and I could go on for hours talking about toy cars, and my girlfriend is indescribably patient with my love of toy cars, is that sometimes things do go wrong, and everyone has to start somewhere. You know, don't forget that my first car was that. You know, it wasn't finished, and I didn't even attempt to put a paintbrush to it because I wasn't happy with it. So never forget that. But we're not talking about that rubbish, no. Something I wanted to leave you guys with. Time Extended 4, the competition for Time Extended 4. Couldn't enter it, couldn't finish it. But I did make a start. And this was going to be my entry for Time Extended 4. And it was going to be my giant piece of scenery, which will start a scenery channel. And it's something I was going to call the Triumph of Brum, which was that wonderful little car that I gave to Mike Hutchinson back in the day, which has a rule in the rule book named after it, the Murder Tractor. I never finished it, sadly, but it was just a representation of all the different cars and things in games that Brum had managed to either survive or had managed to take down himself. So, yeah. But that will be sort of in another video, and this will all be done. So until next time, thank you for watching Wasteland, and goodbye. Remember, it all starts with one thing. One car, your favourite car that you're proud of. And everything else grows from there. Well, if you're watching this, you've managed to make it through to the very end of the video, or maybe you skipped ahead 5 minutes. Either way, I don't mind. It's all good. You know, we're very casual here at this channel, so don't sweat it. And remember, this video has been made possible by our sponsors, Kyamsil Designs and Green Miniatures. If you use the code JH Miniatures when checking out, then you too can get 10% off your orders. You know, it's a long video, and maybe when you were watching it, you were going, "Oh, I could just start a new project myself." Well, this is the perfect opportunity. So don't you worry about a thing. Just use that code, 10% off. It's probably going to be good forever. So even if you don't use it now, you can always use it in like 15 years from now. It's perfectly fine. And thanks again for watching. You take care, Wasteland. Goodbye.